Welcome to Planet Geography. Today we're dealing with sand dunes. Here's a picture of a sand dune, and in essence they're very kind of simple. It's a depositional feature as wind blows sand into a big pile. That's essentially what a sand dune is. Okay, I've broken it down into 6 steps, and then we'll look at the formation of the different types of dunes, because you often need to know the different types of dune, whether they are the mature dune or the embryo dune, etc. Okay, so first of all, we need sand. We need a supply of sand, right? So generally, this is found in areas with constructive waves and with big sandy beaches, okay, where deposition is really taking place. And then over time, that combines with strong winds. So you need a kind of a windy landscape to produce these. That's why the UK has so many big sand dunes. It has many areas where there's depositional waves and strong winds, and as a result you can get huge sand dunes. Okay? You also need an obstacle present. Now this could be a rock, but think of it as an anchor. Yep, you have an anchor, and what happens is the sand is blown up against that obstacle, that anchor, and allows it to build up from there. So this is really where the dune starts, okay, from that obstacle. We have sand accumulate, so I hope you know what accumulate means. It just means to add up. It builds up and it builds up. And as it grows, it traps more sand. And then we have the dune's growth. So again, a sand dune really is new land being formed. And so when the dune grows, what you then start to see is a thing called plant succession. Plants start to grow and they die, and when they die, they form soil. And that starts to form actual land as we know it, okay? Okay, so let's look at what the timeline of a sand dune looks like. Remember, this is a depositional feature, so this is really new land being created, okay? And that's done through the build-up of sediment. So, just before we start and really get into it, let's just see how the dune changes. It's going to go from young to old. It's going to go from low vegetation to high vegetation, and it's going to go from low nutrients, and these two are really linked, to high nutrients, okay, as the nutrient cycle starts to become established. All right, so if deposition is going to take place, we are going to need sediment, okay? And if we're going to have lots of sediment, we're going to need it to really start from a big sandy beach. So we need a source for this sediment. And the source, what you should know from units on coasts and wave types, check out my video if you haven't seen it, is going to come from constructive waves, okay? Those constructive waves, with their powerful swash and their weak backwash, are going to be our source of sediment. It will build up and it will build up and it will build a big sandy beach. At the top of the beach, there will be an elevated mound of sediment, which we're going to call a berm, okay? Berm is somewhere between a beach and a dune, okay? And you probably saw something similar to this when you were on your coast fieldwork trip, okay? After the berm comes the very first sand dune, okay? We're going to call this, once I can find my black pen, the embryo dune. Now, what's the difference between a dune and a beach? This is going to be about 1 meter high, or less, but it's going to get much larger over time as the sand builds up. Okay, it's quite exposed, but there is one type of vegetation that can survive here. Okay, in these very windy, low nutrient, and very exposed conditions, it is marram grass. So here is an image of a embryo dune and some marram grass. Okay, now This is significant because the marram grass is it's the pioneer, it's the first one there. And that marram grass is going to die, it's going to degrade, and it's going to start to form soil. That soil will eventually allow other, more established plants like trees and bushes to start arriving, okay? But after we have the embryo June, we have the forejune. Again, this forejune is a little bit larger. You'd expect it to be somewhere in the region of 1 to 5 meters. So you can see that sediment is clearly building up. It's becoming more stable. It's not just a pile of sand. It's actually got some weight to it. And this is slightly more dense coverage. And that is becoming because there is starting to establish a little bit over time thicker soil with higher nutrients, okay, as that nutrient cycle becomes more and more active. The next June is the yellow June, and the color, the names become, I will explain to you in a second. It still has that yellow color because the vegetation has not become that established yet. You know, there is a lot more marram grass at this point. It's become more and more densely covered in terms of vegetation. And that is starting to build some soil, but it hasn't yet started to change the color. You can expect these yellow dunes, here's a picture of the yellow dune, to be up to 10 meters in height. Yep, dominated by marram grass and still though having that yellow appearance because of fresh sand. The next are grade dunes, and you can start to see that use of, I'm trying to show you the color is changing here as it moves from kind of sediment dominated to really kind of having that soil that you would expect with traditional land. We call it, again, like I say, it is a grey dune. I do think the thing that kids struggle most with is just the names of this. The concept that a pile of sand is just getting a bit bigger, more vegetation, more nutrients. It's quite easy. It's just the names, and you just got to go over them and do retrieval practice on them, okay? They're starting to have a greyish colour. Plant diversity starts to emerge. So yes, you have marram grass. Here is a picture of a grey dune, by the way. But just starting to get some bushes too, and some shrubs. No, we're not talking trees yet, but yeah, some kind of variety in the vegetation that you're seeing there. And again, every time you think about your nutrient cycle, we have littering, then we have decomposition, and all of that is adding soil to it. The next kind of thing is what we're going to call a dune slack. This is a bit of a luxury. You don't really need to know this. I reckon you can get away with not. But it's a low point between two dunes, okay? And as a result, it tends to fill up with precipitation, okay? It doesn't have very good drainage, and so it builds up, accumulates that water over time. It's also quite close to the water level. So again, it ends up being quite a damp area of kind of wet, marshy ground. Water-loving plants tend to love this, such as rushes and sedges, and it tends to be quite high in biodiversity because now you're providing birds and mice and all and bugs and eagles. You're providing them with what they need: vegetation and water. So now biodiversity can really start to accelerate. They will continue to add to the soil. You know, when these eagles pass away, when they poo and all of that stuff, it will add more soil to the ground. And then the last one is the mature dune. The ground is very rich and fertile here. Okay, it's started to become almost brown in color. You can almost feel it you can feel like, yes, I'm kind of technically on a still on a dune, but this is really more land. And the big giveaway is big vegetation like trees start to appear, woodland starts to take shape. You can have things trees like pine and oak. And this kind of represents the final stage of the cycle. There tends to not to be too much sediment here because it's almost starved of sediment by the time it gets to this point, okay? So remember, this is a depositional coastal feature that comes from constructive waves creating a supply of sediment that builds up over time, and then you see plant succession as marine grass starts to dominate, then the emergence of bushes and shrubs before established trees like pines and oaks. Okay, just before I go, here is a picture of a mature dune, and you can see the journey it's been on. Hope you found that useful. I'll look for an exam question if I can find one. We'll jump into that now. Like and subscribe for future videos. I'll be making more and more videos as we move towards the GCSEs, and good luck in them. Okay, see you later. Take care.